So if I asked you right now to define what an A player means to your business, could you do it? Because most hiring managers can't, and that's the problem. Every company says that they want A players. It's in the job descriptions, it's in the boardrooms, it's in every conversation with a recruiter. Everybody wants A players. But here's the problem. If I asked 10 hiring managers to define what an A player actually is, I'd get 10 completely different answers. And that's not just a vocabulary issue, it's a fundamental problem affecting the outcome of your hiring. Because if you can't define it, then you can't identify it. And if you can't identify it, well, then you've been guessing this whole time and just calling it a strategy. That's why in this video, I'm gonna break down the 5 traits that actually separate A players from everyone else. Not theory, I'm talking about the exact framework that I've used to identify them and has led me to hire more than 10,000 candidates across hundreds of businesses. And I'll tell you this, if you stick with me through the end of this video, you'll leave being able to evaluate talent better than 99% of the recruiters out there. And more importantly, you'll have a framework that you can use starting tomorrow. So if you're new to this channel, I wanna say welcome. My name is Jared Black. I'm the founder of NewVine Employment Group. We're a global recruitment firm that combines the power of AI with hands-on expertise to help companies find and hire A players fast. And over the last decade, we've placed more than 10,000 employees across more than 300 businesses. But what actually sets us apart is the methodology behind those placements. We don't just fill positions, we build systems that identify people who stay, perform, and grow. And that's what I want to share with you today. Ready to dive in? Let's get into it. Now, I've broken down what makes an A player into 5 specific traits, and I want to walk you through each one. And let's start with the first trait, and it's the one that reframes everything. So here's where most companies get it wrong right out of the gate. When a role opens up within their organization, they immediately think, I need someone quick, I gotta fill this position. And I understand that instinct because you have an empty seat and you need a body in it, but that thinking is the first mistake because an open role isn't just a gap to fill. It's actually a signal that something else needs to be solved. Maybe it's a leadership void. Maybe it's a department that has been stalling over the last several months. And maybe it's a function that's never really been built properly in the first place. Every opening is different, and every problem behind each one is also very different. The issue is that most hiring processes, they treat every opening like it's the same shape. They post a job, they screen a bunch of resumes and just pick the most qualified one out of the batch. But really thinking about it like that, it's like going to a doctor and getting the same prescription, no matter what your ailment, no matter what's wrong with you. You have a headache, here's your pills. You have back pain, here's the same pills. You have broken leg, here's the same pills. It doesn't work that way. That's not a diagnosis. That's just a flawed system. But an A player sees the problem behind the role. They don't just step into the seat. They diagnose what's actually broken and then they start building toward a better solution. Think about it like renovating a house for a second. You hire a B player to, fix something wrong with your home. They're not going to solve the underlying problem. They're just going to patch up the wall and just be on their way. But an A player will look beyond. They'll look for that underlying issue. Maybe it's structural damage. Maybe there's a crack in the foundation. But the same home can have 2 completely different outcomes based on whether you're hiring an A player or a B or a C player. So what do we call that? Well, that's what we refer to as the X factor, which is trait number 1. An A player doesn't just meet the job description. They will make you rewrite it. And if your hiring process only measures whether someone can do the job, you'll never find someone who can actually transform it. Now guys, that's just trait number 1. We still have 4 more left to go, and they're gonna start to build on each other, so stay with me. But before we keep moving, I have a quick pause. Now, I'm gonna keep breaking down this framework piece by piece, so stay with me. But if you want the full methodology laid out so that you can execute on it immediately, it's my signature method to hiring A players. It's available to you as a PDF download completely for free. So go ahead and grab it from the link in the description below. Great, let's jump back in. So we've already talked about the X factor, and that's the ability to see beyond the role and solve real problems. But here's the thing, how do you know if someone actually has that ability? That brings us to trait number 2. Skills verification. All right, so let's talk about resumes for just a quick second because most hiring processes, they treat the resume like it's some sort of verified document, like it's a fact-checked, peer-reviewed, stamped and approved document. It hasn't. In fact, nearly 50% of resumes contain some crazy exaggeration or just outright lies. 50%. That means roughly half the candidates that are sitting in front of you are performing a version of themselves that may not even really exist. Think about it like online dating. The profile says adventurous, loves hiking, highly active, and you show up on the date and there they are and they haven't left the couch since 2019. The resume is the dating profile, but the skills verification is the first date. But unfortunately for most companies, they're ready for marriage just off the profile photo. You see, A players welcome the skills verification. They want to demonstrate, not just describe what they've done, because they know that their track record speaks much louder than their words. And look, the data backs me up on this. Research has shown that the total years of experience has only a 6% correlation to job performance. Just 6%, that's basically zero. Meanwhile, skills-based assessments are 5 times more predictive than education or tenure alone. So if you're skipping the skills verification and hiring off resumes and gut feelings alone, you're not evaluating talent. You're just evaluating a story. Okay, so now you've got someone who sees the big picture. They've actually proven that they can do the work. That's 2 for 2. Congrats. But here's where a lot of companies think that they're completely done. And it's exactly where things start to fall apart, because trait number 3, if missed, might be the most expensive mistake on the entire list. Trait number 3 is values alignment. And it's the one that gets overlooked the most, because most companies, they assess values fit as more like a vibe check during the interview process. Somebody seems friendly, they laugh at the right moments, they say the right things, and the hiring manager just walks out of the room and they're thinking, yeah, that person, they'd fit right in. But that's not an assessment. That's just hope. Think about it. I think we've all seen this situation play out some way or another. A candidate who looked absolutely perfect on paper. They crushed their interview. They had the skills, they had the experience, and you were thrilled. But then 6 weeks later, they were a disaster. And it's not because they were a bad person. It's because their values, how they operate, and what they prioritize. They were fundamentally misaligned with the company's DNA. And the moment that pressure hit, the cracks, they showed. Decision-making didn't match, communication style clashed, and priorities were different. And within months, that person who you thought was a perfect hire is now gone. And now you're starting over. Plus, you have the cost of the damage left behind to deal with. In fact, an A player in the wrong culture becomes a C player overnight. See, it just doesn't matter how talented they are. If their personal values and their standards don't match to the way that your company actually operates, I'm talking about how you actually run your company on a day-to-day, they will fail. In fact, employees who are hired for both skills and values alignment show a 25% higher performance rating and a 40% lower turnover. Because you can teach skills, but you can't necessarily teach someone to value the same things that you value. All right, so at this point, we've covered the X factor, we've covered the skills, and we've covered the core values. 3 traits that most companies either assess very poorly or just ignore altogether. But there's a 4th layer, and this 4th layer tends to trip people up because it hides in the one place that companies tend to trust the most: the interview. Now, the interview itself can be one of the biggest blind spots in hiring, because the interview is a performance. It's a stage, and some people are exceptionally good at performing on that stage, but absolutely terrible at the actual job. And the reason for that is misalignment in personality type. You see, some candidates have gotten so good at interview speak, they can overcome a lot of small hurdles. But if they don't possess the personality type to really drive success in your specific role, they will eventually fail. Here's a very simple example. You put a natural introvert into a role that requires nonstop, client-facing, high energy, 8 hours a day. They might be brilliant. They might have the skills that you need, and they're going to burn out. They're going to disengage, and they're eventually going to leave. And it's not because they weren't talented. It's not because they didn't have the skills. It's because the role demanded a personality that they simply did not possess. And that's what personality assessments help you prevent. You see, every human has inherent strengths and core traits that make them who they are. And in the case of A players, these traits can be recognized and therefore become predicators of success under real conditions. Traits like accountability, adaptability, low ego, high ownership, the list goes on. But these aren't things that you can discover in just a 25, 30-minute conversation. You need a structured way to first know what they are, then surface them, and then identify them. And the numbers are very clear on this. Studies have found that unstructured interviews have a 20% positive impact on job performance. But when you combine structured interviews with the personality assessment, the positive performance impact jumps over 50%. And that's the difference between guessing and predicting. So if you're thinking back to your past hires and your interview process rewards charm over character, and you continue that, you're just going to keep hiring the wrong people, and you're going to wonder why. All right, we're crushing this so far. We've covered X factor, skills verification, values alignment, and the personality fit. And the last trait is what really locks in A players and really separates the good outcomes from the great. Trait number 5 is growth potential. Like I mentioned earlier, most companies, they hire for today's problem. They look at the role and they look at what needs to get done right now. And then they go out and find someone who can solve for that specific issue. But A players solve today's problem and then start solving tomorrow's. You see, the difference is that the best hires are when you have alignment between where you want to go as a business and where the candidate is passionate about going. There is a synced vision and a shared desire to get there. To an A player, growth potential is more than just title growth or maybe salary growth. It's continuing to be challenged. It's more opportunities to build. It's intellectual curiosity. It's chances to improve themselves. It's the ability to absorb feedback and then adapt and practice in real time. These are all signals of growth potential. And in fact, it's a trait that compounds over time. Just think about how professional sports franchises draft new players to their teams. The best franchises don't just draft for this season, they draft for the dynasty. The teams that are building sustained excellence aren't just chasing the best player for today. They're identifying who's going to be elite in 2 years, 5 years, 10 years. That's your growth potential. Now, why is growth potential such an important piece to hiring new players and a part of my methodology? Well, it's because 83% of recruiting professionals are in agreement in saying engaging with passive candidates is the most critical recruiting skill going forward. And passive candidates, the people who aren't actively looking, are almost always growth-minded A players already excelling somewhere else. And they're not leaving because things are bad. They leave because someone showed them a trajectory that they just could not ignore. You see, A players don't just want a job. They want that trajectory. And if you can't show them one, someone else will. And that's just a reality of today's talent market. All right, guys, so that's the framework. You have 5 traits: X factor, verified skills, values alignment, personality assessment, and growth potential. And if you can identify all 5, you're not guessing anymore. Now you're operating with a system. But there's this punch in the gut feeling that you get when you realize that most companies, they don't have a system to actually find these people. They're missing the entire systematic approach: the sourcing, the engaging, the qualifying, and the full screening. Knowing what an A player looks like is one thing, but building the pipeline to consistently attract and identify them is something completely different. But that's exactly what we built our company to solve. We combine the power and efficiency of AI with hands-on human expert recruiters to take the pain and the pressures of hiring off your shoulders completely. We build the pipeline, we handle the sourcing, we engage the candidates, we qualify them, and we deliver you talented professionals who are ready to have real conversations, fully screened, fully vetted. Now, if you want to see how this works for your company, go ahead and book a discovery call with our team. The link for that is in the description below. And if you want to take this a step further and you want to see how the framework actually plays out in practice, I'm talking about from sourcing to placement in a matter of days, not months, go watch this video right here. It's titled How to Hire A Players in 7 Days. It's the exact process that we deploy for our clients, and it connects directly to everything that we just walked through in this video. But before you go, here's my challenge to you. The next time someone on your team says, "We need an A player," I want you to stop the conversation and I want you to ask one question. Define it. If they can't tell you exactly what that means, with specifics, with traits, with a framework, then you're not hiring for excellence. You're hiring for a feeling, and that won't scale your company. So now that you have the framework, comment below and tell me what A players are you hiring this month. I want to hear about it. I'm looking forward to seeing your comments. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.